And I'm going to tell you a story about a child, my first year at the school. So I just finished my 4th year in the school system. So my first year, a child that was brought to my attention by a colleague in the school system, and we're going to call him Billy to protect his confidentiality. So Billy had started kindergarten, and I was hearing several school staffs, teachers, another specialist staff talk about this child, like we don't know what is wrong with him, what is going on, and they were describing all these behaviors of this kindergartner, which if I didn't know that they were talking about a child, it would have sounded a lot like some kind of rabid animal. And I'm not trying to be funny, like that's what, we were seeing in the classroom. And finally someone said, well, Aubrey, what do you think? And so I said, can we just go sit down and talk about this? I feel like I need to take some notes. And the more they talked, the more I was like, wow, like what has happened to this child? And then when they told me the child's name, that's where this ton of bricks comes from. It was a child that I had worked with as a CPS social worker. So, I've been listening and probably multitasking as they were talking about all these behaviors of this student. And then when they said his name, I suddenly felt responsible. Like I was called to make sure that every person in that school building understood that this child was different. They needed to think outside of the box. I couldn't articulate that in that moment. I just had to get out of that conference room. My ears started ringing, my face got red, I started to break a sweat. Because, in the moment too, I'm like, look, how much can I tell them? I can't tell this whole story, So I had to sort all of those things out within myself. But what the staff didn't know was that Billy was very attached, very, very attached to his mother. When he was 2, I was called out at 3 o'clock in the morning to remove him from his home. There was gang violence going on in our small community, but we don't have gangs in Davie County. Parents were addicted to drugs, just a sad situation. So I, found somewhere for him to go. It was actually with their grandmother that night. I ended up not doing the investigation of that case. It was transferred to one of my colleagues, but then I got the case back for in-home services. So I worked very closely with mom and dad in CPS in-home. And this was a mom that I always knew, I thought I knew, she would do whatever she could and she would get him back. And she almost did. Billy ended up going into foster care. And then later, mom and dad worked a case plan. He was placed by the court in a trial home placement. And he almost got his mama and daddy back. And then, addiction is a disease. Something happened and he wasn't able to stay there. So he ended up being with grandma full time. So I say all this because, learning these things with Billy in the classroom that he was experiencing, he was biting, kicking, running, throwing, trying to stab teacher assistants with scissors, and I just thought, wow, this is one child that we know, or I know, a lot more about his story, but there are so many that we're never going to know why they're doing what they're doing. They may not even know what happened to them, but this situation has just weighed heavily on me ever since, just because, we were having to do things like think outside the box, modify our day. Like educators' tool belts are very limited when it comes to things beyond your student that is able to regulate on their own, is articulate and is able to tell you how they're feeling, can sit and focus and do math and reading and all these things. But there are so many kids that we're missing, I feel like, that are flying under the radar and are falling through the cracks for reasons just like Billy. So Brandy and I started having these conversations a couple years ago, but I really feel like, we get busy. If I'm just being honest, I get busy. I have 4 schools. I feel like I don't do a lot of productive work. I'm putting out fires. Does anybody else feel like that? Because I definitely do. But it's like student after student after student. There are so many Billies in all of my schools.